Go ahead, come to me. Daughter, won't let me be.
I'm afraid this country is so hidebound by political correctness that we have allowed the mass sexual rape and abuse of thousands of underage girls in northern cities, and we've done nothing about it.
Nigel Farage over in England commenting on the PC culture that has allowed a lot of people in the Muslim community in England free reign is what he's talking about. No penalties for rapes, parts of the country that are, some people call them no-go zones. And it's happening across Europe, quite frankly. But specifically, that comment was his concern, and the likes of Katie Hopkins raised the same concern, that the country stands up and claims they're not going to put up with this, and then they'll turn right around and do nothing about it because it wouldn't be politically correct, which is really a sad state of affairs. I'll get to more of your phone calls coming up. 314-969-9797. Let me get to my guest, Dakota Wood, who's a senior research fellow in the Center for National Defense at the Davis Institute for National Security and Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation. Dakota, good to have you back on the show.
It's always great to be with you. You got the best soundtrack.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So this terrorist attack, we keep finding out that this thing may have deeper roots than they originally thought. They've arrested, I think, 4 other people in this case, several of them over in Libya. They now think the guy went to Syria and got trained on how to do this and came back and did it. What are the implications here?
Well, I mean, there's always a deeper story, and I think to your opening comments, it's an unwillingness to exercise good judgment. So you or I would decide whether it's a good idea to walk to the local store in our neighborhood at 2 o'clock in the morning, right?
Sure.
And yet we don't exercise the same kind of rational judgment calls in our national politics. And you're seeing the effects of that in the streets of Paris and Manchester, obviously, and London, Berlin, capitals across Europe. So this desire to be gracious, to not be seen as judgmental, to be welcoming, all these great attributes that people want to be, well considered, actually opens up opportunities where very bad people exploit that. And I think to your larger point, it's that lack of rationality and making a call based on value systems and what's acceptable and isn't that allows this kind of evil to bubble up.
Yeah, I think back to 2014 or 2015, a guy named Philip Haney came forward. He was a whistleblower. He complained at the time that he was shut down basically in his role as I guess he was basically an investigator. Looking into the relationships between outside groups and mosques all over the country. And his allegation basically was that the Obama administration shut down his ability to look into these mosques for purely political correctness reasons. And he believed that the particular mosque, one of the ones he was looking at, ended up being connected to the San Bernardino terrorist attack. And he felt that they're hampering our ability. So we complain about that in Europe, but we're already seeing the fact that America's headed down that path. I'm hoping the Trump administration reverses that.
Yeah, if you saw certain behaviors in a big city and it seemed to be linked to criminality, nobody would complain about the police department going after organized crime, trying to take down the mafia families. But you put the veneer of religion on it, or certain cultural groups, and now all of a sudden you can't do that. It's off limits, right? So
right.
I think it needs to be evidence-based. I think we should be holding our public officials accountable for exercising good judgment. That doesn't mean that we're inherently biased or we're prejudicial, based on race or ethnicity or something like that. It's just looking at behaviors. So if you were to stretch a timeline and look at all the various terrorist incidents that have occurred, and then start doing some correlation, you would see that the preponderance of these things come out of the Islamic world. For whatever reason, that culture facilitates the growth of very violent jihadism. It doesn't mean that all Muslims are that way by any stretch, but you got to go where the data leads you. And if you prevent, your investigators from following those kinds of leads, then we shouldn't be surprised when we've got an attack like what happened in Miami, with the nightclub, or San Bernardino, or these horrific incidents like Boston or Manchester, England, or these other places.
I just, as a matter of background, I want to remind people we're talking to Dakota Wood from the Heritage Foundation, but in his background, he's retired from the U.S. Marine Corps as a lieutenant colonel. I mentioned that. You did some work with NATO support. Obviously, you look into national security issues all the time. What about the leak issue that is suddenly making headlines today of this intelligence that the New York Times suddenly found dropped in its lap? To me, this leak issue was a big problem a long time before yesterday, but now everybody seems concerned about it, and the president's promising an investigation.
Yeah, I think inherently that sort of stuff is just the absolute worst examples of selfishness. So you have an individual in whatever, whether it's White House, a newsroom, or what have you, but there's a person. Their agenda is being stymied, or they're angry at somebody, or they don't like who is elected to office. So they're going to do something to undermine or to, get glory or something like that and leak things. And by selfish, I mean it's their interest above national interest.
Right.
When we undermine the chief executive, when we reveal information, like the Brits have shared information on the bombing that occurred there in Manchester, somebody leaked that to the New York Times. They published pictures, and now the Brits say we can't trust the Americans to share terrorism-related information or intelligence because they're gonna get sloppy and let it out. And I think it's just completely ruinous. It damages relationships among intelligence communities and against national leaders, and ultimately comes back to create a larger harm. So this petty selfishness is really damaging United States security interests.
Well, clearly the threat of felony charges and jail time is not enough to dissuade them.
Well, nobody's pursued that.
That's true.
I mean, if we had actually thrown somebody into jail or brought them up on charges or something along those lines, but again, it's the same kind of PC correctness, or I've got a larger political agenda at play, and so I don't want to pursue something that may not resolve in a conviction, but I think there's still value in doing that because it puts folks on notice. If you don't believe that there's a consequence to these kind of damaging actions, then you're going to pursue whatever your personal agenda is.
Yeah. Well, I hope the Attorney General follows up on this one and this thing is taken seriously. Dakota Wood, thanks so much for your time.
Real pleasure.
Absolutely. I'll direct people to heritage.org. You can read more about Dakota and see some of the other interviews he's done on this issue and many others. He's also done some good stuff on North Korea. And the situation over there. So we'll continue to check back in with him in the future. All right, 314-969-9797. Al, I will get to your phone call when we come back. We've got a few lines open right now, so give us a ring. I want to bring back up this Philip Haney case, which is really rather interesting when you find out what they just uncovered up in Minnesota, where there's been a pretty radical group of Somalis operating up there for a long time, and political correctness has kind of stopped us from cracking down on it. That and much more still ahead on The Mark Cox Show.
This is The Mark Cox Show.
Time to hear. Never takes time. I will. Hey, now, darling.
Air Comfort Service Heating and Cooling. Weather with Dave Murray.
Partly sunny and nice. 75 for the high.